Hello everyone, my name is Daniel and I'm a programmer and an artist, and today I'm back in this file with all the assets I've been working on, and I've been making furniture models. So today I thought I would go through one of those and just show how I've been putting them together. It's pretty standard modeling stuff, just trying to make sure I make good use of modifiers where those will be helpful and stuff. So first I have a reference, and I try to capture the sort of the silhouette of the object in a curve. It's just a simple two-dimensional curve. Then I just sweep that curve with a straight line to make it three-dimensional. It's essentially the same as extruding it out on the y-axis. And then that's a mesh I can use on my build walls node. So then I use build walls just to make the sort of the outer shape of the piece. And I made a bunch of those, and then I can just copy it and make a different shape. So then to take it from here, it's just a matter of adding the finishing details. So I'll convert it to a mesh. The first thing I want to do is just get rid of all of the duplicate vertices, so I'll do a merge by distance. So then you can see that kind of breaks shading a little bit. We'll kind of work with that as we go along. So I have a bunch of pieces that I copied from some of these other models I already made. So you have some handles from one of the other ones, this sort of front, and a detail piece of a grease pencil stroke of a leg. So first thing I want to do is I want to replace the front of this, or actually all of this probably, with this piece because I've already done the work on it. So we'll go in edit mode and just add a loop cut here so we can see where the center is. Then I'll line this up with that center. I'm going to turn off the textures so it's easier to see. It doesn't have to be perfect, so I'm just going to eyeball it there. Then I'm going to get rid of in this mesh everything that's not the actual front of the dresser. I'm going to take those keyholes out. Then I'm just going to line everything up, so we'll just slide this over. Because there's multiple drawers, I'm actually going to scale this up on the z-axis until it's almost right. So once we have that, we can just merge it into the model, and then I'm going to select this edge here and just extrude it back out. And then we'll select this edge and extrude it out. I'm just going to get rid of all of the seams. Now I want to make doors on the front, so we'll split this in half and do an inset. If you press inset again, it insets individual. So I'm actually going to go to the front. I'll just make it approximately the same size as that reference. Let's do an inset, extrude it in a little bit. Do another little inset. Now I want the area around these doors to look like the trim on the door, so we need to set up the UVs for that. So we need a seam here to separate the sort of the back of the door. And then we just need seams in all the corners here. And then we'll need a seam here. And then we'll need a seam not only here, but also in all of the areas that separate sort of the bulk of the model from these trim details. I also like to mark sharp the sort of inside corners on this. So I'll just mark those sharp because it makes the detail in the trim pieces a little more visible. Go ahead and make a seam here, and just have the top. Then here I want to make a top, so we'll extrude this down and then fill it, separate the face. And let's go ahead and just do an unwrap on all of this to see what we're looking at. So this is the trim pieces. Just do merge by distance, and then we need to separate this top again because I wanted that separate. I'll just put two seams here running down the side. See how that works. You can see it almost works. What is this from? Oh, you can see the whole front got merged together somehow. So we can just select all of these and then grow the selection to, which should get the edges. Then we can unwrap those. And then if we go into the UV edit mode, we can say make seams from islands, and it should add the seams for us around each of the drawers. We can just unwrap again. Now here I want to add a material for a detail piece here. So that's this overlay. So it's just a trim sheet. So if we unwrap this, we can rotate it 90 degrees and pick a detail we like. Let's use this one. Just line that up. Sure, it looks pretty good. Now I wanted to make sure that the grain on all of these runs the right way, so it's too big right now, so I'm just going to unwrap this again. Usually Blender makes any edges that are long run vertically in the UVs until at least it does that initially until it runs out of space. So in this case everything looks okay. We're getting some weird unwrapping on some of these trim pieces. So I'm just going to add some seams on these corners because I think that's where the bending's coming from. Just on the trim part of it. So then if we unwrap that again, we can select this again. So I wanted it smaller. So now we can see on the front there's some really weird shading happening. So I'm going to select all of this and just inset it a tiny bit, individual off, so that we get a loop around the edge. Another thing we can do to help with the weird shading is we can put a bevel on this edge. So to do that, I just turn the bevel weight up, add a bevel modifier, set to width and weight, and then I always like to turn off this clamp override, and then I just turn this really far down to like 0.001 or 25 or something. You can mark this sharp. Just going through here, going to mark some of these edges sharp. So I'm just seeing that the textures look really blurry here, so I'm going to unwrap these again. Just by themselves, which should make them bigger. So then here at the top, we can just hide this loop. Select everything that's linked, unhide that loop, and then unwrap that. So here, I'm just seeing that these are running horizontally. I think they look better vertically. Select all of these, unwrap those again. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that for the base model. So it's just a matter of adding the little details. So we can bring in these drawer pulls from one of the other models. We'll just select them all and snap them. Select all of these. Snap them to here. Just sort of line them up. And this one here has a keyhole, so we'll put it up at the top here. You can see now the reference doesn't actually line up quite right, so I'm going to actually align these vertically here. So it looks like they're all just trying to gauge that there's an equal space on all of these between the top of the drawer and the hole. Then this has a mirror on it, so then all we have to do is snap the origin of this to the geometry, snap the cursor to the selected, and then snap the origin of this to the 3D cursor, and it should mirror all the handles for us properly. Oops. Then we can bring these keyhole pieces over. We just have to line them up. So I think it should be about here. And then we also want some down here on these doors. And then I also just like to vary these slightly, especially if they're close to each other, so that they don't quite look like copies. If I end up baking textures for this, even the handles might just be baked into the texture. So then this is something that's pretty cool that I came up with. We're going to use this to do the detail on the we'll use this to do the detail on the door or something similar to it. We can't actually do, there's too much detail there, so we'll do an approximation of the detail. But the way this piece is made is using the skin modifier. Problem with the skin modifier is I'm trying to make a low poly thing, and it puts all these extra loops in. Whatever resolution you pick, that won't only be the radius of it, but also like the spacing between loops. So I started thinking about it and tried to see if I could make a node group to clean it up, and I was able to do that. So I'll take a quick look at that node group. So what I'm doing is I'm first checking the edge angle to get all the edges with an angle greater than 0, so anything that's not perfectly flat, and I'm separating that out. Then I'm going to just delete all the points that aren't connected to a face. And then if I separate out the edges that have more than one face, I can get these. This is all, because so what I'm trying to do is select all of the vertices that I want to keep, and then say the rest of these can be merged somehow. So this is almost right, but you can see here there's some extra ones here. We actually just need this edge. So the way I do that is I find that edge by looking for edges with more than one face and duplicating that edge. Then I delete those faces. So you go from this to this, and then I just merge the edge back into that result. So then we can use our original geometry and then sample the nearest one of these points, and then use that to find the shortest edge path to that point. So this is just, we're sampling here the index, and we're measuring how far away is it, and we're doing a selection based on if it's greater than 0. So it's 0 if the vertex is in the same position as one of these of our targets, and otherwise it's selected. So then we just have this really ugly iteration because we can't do for loops yet. So this breaks if you go further away than the number of iterations you do. But all that happens in the iteration is we have our input geometry, which looks like this, and then we have our guide. So then we have this guide mesh, which is the original mesh with all of the edges that have a flat angle on them removed. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take this guide mesh and we're going to find the shortest edge path from a vertice to one of the target vertices. And we're going to step one step closer to that. So if this was a vertex, say this was a vertex, we'd move one edge, well, the closest one would be here, so we'd move one edge this way and then set the position to equal that next vertex in the shortest edge path. And then if we do that multiple times, the next time we do it, the vertex will start here and it'll step one more this way. And then we do it again, it'll be here and it'll step one more this way. And then as we reach the end, they just stay there. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking that guide mesh modified to slide the edges away from the centers towards our target endpoints using the shortest edge path. And we're sampling the nearest one of those, which starts out being almost identical to our input mesh, and then as we step, the vertices in the middle keep moving towards the ends, and it pulls the actual mesh along with it. So we sample the nearest of our altered guide mesh to get an index, then we sample at that index the position of the altered guide mesh, and then we pass that position into a set position on the original input geometry, and then you can see the difference here. We start out with these loops in the middle, then we do one step and they move one step away. So then if you come out and you do that multiple times, you can see that the edges at the center slowly march towards the ends, and you can just copy that as many times as you need to because we can't do loops yet. So it's pretty ugly, but it works, and it makes this a super fast way to model sort of thin details. Then since this is going to go against the surface of the furniture here, I don't actually need these back faces, so I made another node group that's just deletes things based on the dot product comparison to a vector. So here I can just see that all the faces I don't want are pointing in the y direction. So I can just pass in 1 in y as the vector, and then this node group is just simple vector into a dot product with the normal. Compare that to the threshold. If it's greater than the threshold, delete it, the face. So I'm pretty happy with that. Workflow is a quick way to make these sort of thin detail bits. So for this, I'm just going to sort of make something that's approximately this shape. And one of the reasons this is cool is it can do forks. you can have like 3 edges coming into one vertex, and it'll actually make a mesh for that. Whereas if you did a curve or something, it wouldn't have a way of handling that. So I don't know, something like that could work. It's really just something to see from a distance. So just position it here so it's nicely in that space, and we can give it, I have this contrast material that's slightly darker. So there you go. That's how I've been modeling these. So it's just a matter of trying to make it the right size. We'll bring a scale figure over. So one thing you can look at is the height of the countertop. You can also look at the height of the piece overall. Like if it's, how's he going to see in this top drawer? So it probably isn't going to be much taller than him. Something like that. We'll just place this there. So there you have it. That's what I've been working on. Hopefully there is an interesting trick or two in there. I think the skin modifier with the extra geometry nodes to clean it up is particularly useful. Although the fact that you have to do the iterative copy paste to step through all of the loops is kind of a pain. But anyway, hopefully there's some interesting tidbits in there that you were able to take away. I've got a big set of geometry node assets and some other tools on Gumroad, which you can check out there if you haven't seen them already. And yeah, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks for watching.